Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We'll make a start. Just before we do start, I'd just like to welcome Jane Greer, who's the Acting Head of Community Wellbeing, the first covered in that position. Right, so item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Oh, sorry, yes. I do need to mention that this cabinet meeting is being filmed by your Harlow, and the film will be put on the council's website after the meeting. So, apologies for absence. There are none. They're all present. Are there any declarations of interest?
Sorry, I've got a non-pecuniary interest in agenda item 19 because I'm the District Council's board member on Circular Housing Group.
Thank you. Item 3, the minutes at pages 1 to 7. Are they a correct record?
Great.
Item 4, any matters arising?
Chair, page 2 of the minutes, section 85, where it discussed the discretionary services. The cabinet member made an undertaking to send me information on the evaluations and the scorecards in terms of the discretionary services. I haven't received that, and I was wondering when I will receive that information that was promised to me at the last cabinet.
You can resend it if it
I
hasn't been
haven't
received.
it. I'll check.
Yeah.
No. Right, item 5, written questions from the public. We have 2.
Yes, please. Question 1. Why are paper copies of agendas still sent to councillors as they have tablets to receive?
Significant delay outside of the council's control with the installation of a new Wi-Fi network. The Wi-Fi installation is necessary to provide resilience and to ensure that agendas and other documents can be made fully accessible electronically at meetings of councillors and members of the public. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Howard?
What steps are the council taking to ensure that this is carried out as quickly as possible, as we are lagging seriously behind?
The delays have been unfortunate. I mean, rather simplistically, this is about getting permission from landowners to dig a hole outside the civic centre to put the Virgin Media new access to the internet. That has taken an eternally long time. We are now on the final little bit of land where we need a wayleave to complete. I am expecting that this will be complete in the near future, and I've also asked officers to look at contingency plans should that not be happening soon.
16 is due to the cost of clear-up necessary due to the actions of travellers in Harlow.
The proposed increase in council tax is not related to any of the costs incurred by the council in relation to the clearing of sites across the town as a result of travellers. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry, I can't understand that answer because travellers have not been here since the year dot. So, where in previous budgets have this charge been, or what are you doing? What are you not doing so that to cover the cost of the clear up? Because everyone's saying it's costing £40,000-50,000. So, or are you taking it out?
Today has been contained entirely within existing budgets, and there's been no detrimental effect, simply a sort of underspend. If necessary, we will use reserves to pay for further costs, although we don't anticipate that will be necessary at this time.
Topic waste and recycling contract. Just out of interest, could we get a little summary or details of what that report will actually be?
I'll always have to be distributed. Here's the contract is up for renewal next year. There are, in addition to that, there are conversations going on at a county level around the interagency agreement and possible future arrangements for waste collection and disposal, which may impact that. But I will make sure that a summary drops out anything about it.
Thank you. paper in March will also bring forward possible options to re-extend the current contract.
Any other comments on the forward plan? Item 9, there have been no decisions made by the legal holders. Item 10, the outcome of the LGA peer challenge, which I will move. We have a seconder.
Happy to second, Chair.
I'll just make some brief remarks. For me, this was part of a desire to be open and transparent about what the council does, and that's why we had an independent look at council. There is much positive to say about the findings of the LGA. I'm not going to read through them all. I'll simply note actually that not only in the comments in the formal report, but also the verbal feedback we had to staff members and council who were invited. The peer team particularly praised the attitude and professionalism of the staff, and I just wanted to note that. In terms of going forward, in terms of recommendation for to continue the improvement journey, what we're asking Scrutiny to do is to look specifically at customer engagement, and there's a terms of reference in the papers here. In addition to that, mechanisms for dealing with members' inquiries will be put in place by, from now, to make sure that those are dealt with appropriately. And there'll be other activity to look at the broader engagement, and there's some conversations going on already about tenant engagement, for example. But the key thing about this will be in terms of reference to the Scrutiny Committee to look at customer engagement in detail. And just so that I think I introduced Jane very early on with a comment about management capacity, and I'm pleased we have an appointment to lead the community wellbeing post.
I welcome this peer review, but there are a number of points that I think need to be brought out from the report that were missing from your summary. In particular, the peer review look at the one-year horizon approach of administrations, whatever political colour. They've talked about that. Now, I think that's important because actually our group has always been of the view that 4-yearly elections provide a greater continuity for administrations to set out a programme, a long-term programme for the council. So I think that's a particular point of interest. In terms of the financial planning viability on page 23, they reference something that our administration, Conservative administration, brought in, which was, of course, the partnership with Wesley Group that has guaranteed, and they say in their own words, long-term income for the council, evidence of a Conservative administration that is putting forward long-term plans to generate income and add value to taxpayers' money. The decision-making process, and that there are issues of governance issues in particular in this council that need to be addressed, and that is not providing great enough clarity for this council and the leadership of this council, which I think is of serious concern. I'd also like to flag the fact that there is key concern over a lack of strategic workforce planning. But that has implications, again, for the long term. We constantly, as a council, need to look at the staffing levels that we have. And in the long term, we face a critical issue. And the peer review has highlighted the fact that there is no strategic workforce planning that is actually up to standard. And this is something that I think needs to be addressed for the long-term future of this council.
In thirds versus an all-out election every 4 years. I'm pretty open-minded about that. Clearly, happy to have further discussions. It is not a simple or quick process to change. I mean, apart from gaining broad agreement, there's a whole load of public consultation, the Commission involved and what have you. I think in the meantime, certainly what I've tried to do is to look at a longer term view of financial planning in particular. I think there are a number of areas where we already have cross-party agreement, particularly in the regeneration area and what have you, and I would look to further those. But so I note the comments, and some internal conversations that have happened, and looking at how members, particularly in the administration and senior officers, can get closer together in terms of co-leadership and decision making. And some of those things have already been put in place and are bearing fruit. In terms of the long-term planning, that's like, can you remind me what your third point was?
I was referring to strategic workforce plan.
Oh, sorry, yes, absolutely. So absolutely understand that. I mean, and that's a conversation we have had and are, you know, continuing to have. I think that will possibly be reflected in further look at HR strategy in particular. But in terms of succession planning and making sure that we bring existing staff through the ranks, if you like, I think the appointment of James Geary is a positive move in that regard.
Thanking our staff. If you read this report, one thing that very clearly sung to me was that we do have a very dedicated body of staff, a very experienced body of staff who are very good at their job. And I think, forget the party politics for a minute, all councillors should just recognise the very good job that our staff do. It was also very pleasing to read the leader of that staff workforce, Chief Executive, business and voluntary sector partners spoke very highly of the Chief Executive's role in maintaining close links. So I think we owe our Chief Executive a debt of thanks there. It talks an awful lot in this report about the changes that have been made in Harlow Council over the last 10 years, and it particularly focuses on that time period a number of times. And I think rightly so, because in 10 years, I've been on the council longer than 10 years, but in the last 10 years, things really have changed. I don't think one political party can lay claim to all of those changes. There's been a variety of different administrations in control of this council over time. And all of them have tried to do some good things to move forward, and I think it's good that that is recognised here. There are, however, some standouts, and as Councillor Charles has already mentioned, the Westerly link, which I know many members of the present administration were particularly against when it was being brought in. I think privatising death was the phrase used by some members of the current administration. It's good to see that the service is now being praised because it has improved and it is generating income for the council, but it's also improved from a service user's perspective. People are now actually pleased to be using the crematorium, whereas before, at the time when people are at their most upset, at the time when they're at their most vulnerable, it wasn't a very nice service to be offering. So I'm pleased that that has improved. Consultation also rings through here, or lack of consultation. There were two comments about consultation that really spoke to me. The first, when it was talking about a lack of transparency in some of the council's management, and the fact that it could sometimes seem to people that consultation was happening after the event. I think that's something this council needs to look very carefully at, because if we're going to do consultation, or if you're going to do consultation, it needs to be done properly, and the people that are being consulted need to feel like they are actually being consulted and listened to. And more importantly, in the most recent consultation, it pointed to your budget consultation, where it's already suggesting that you may be going away from some of the things that residents asked for in that consultation. And what it says is that you really need to make sure your explanations for that are very clear and front and centre, and I would second that. If you're going to consult with people and hear an answer and then not do it, you need to tell people why you're doing that. There's another expression in here, again going back to our staff, to finish on the same positive that I started on. Staff gave some touching examples of where they had gone the extra mile to resolve individual residents' problems. I'm really pleased to hear that, and I hope that all of our staff end up going the extra mile, and that the staff are appraised of what's happened in this consultation, in this peer review, and are told just how much an external organisation thought of them, and how much councillors from all sides think of them.
I take the general point. When I am absolutely serious about consultation and taking it seriously, I did speak to the Churchgate Street Resident Association, in particular the context about the local plan, and there were some things about that sort of lessons to be learned about the next stage of consultation on the local plan. I certainly fed those back to officers and we'll make sure those get put in place. In terms of the budget, we'll get there in a moment, but we will be talking about precisely how we've been responding specifically to the priorities that came back from the budget consultation. And clearly that information in terms of the formation of the budget wasn't available to the peer challenge team at that time. Scrutiny Committee. Are we agreed? As items 11 to 16 are intrinsically related as a set in terms of various aspects of the budget, the corporate plan, I'm intending to move 11 to 16 on block. Do we have a second? And I will second.
The budget, which we will be debating at the council meeting next week in detail. We have been listening, and I think obviously the streetlight issue alone shows how much this authority is actually committed to listening. Primarily with the government cuts and this wretched austerity that's being forced upon us, protecting services and protecting employment have been uppermost in mind. And in putting this budget together, those things have obviously had priority. The other thing which was discussed in detail at the last meeting, which my apologies, was the discretionary fund. We were left up in the air when we took over the administration of this authority. There was no future for the playhouse, there was no future for the paddling pools. Very unclear in terms of the future of many of the discretionary services. Now, they're actually guaranteed up until 2019. There's a lot of forward planning, and in those circumstances, particularly with the playhouse, a lot of plans can actually start to be made to actually have ongoing funding. With regards to the rents, I'm sure Rod can comment, but we're having the lowest rent increase for quite some time, accompanied with actually the most detailed ability to actually do up many of our houses in the next 2 years, which in a sense had been put on the back burner. And the last thing I'd like to say, I agree with everybody else that's been saying this, it's been very helpful of Simon and his team in helping put together this rather important budget this year, because so much rests on the general election chairperson, whether in fact local authorities have got a future. When I was at the police committee this afternoon, we were seeing out of a budget of 250 million, a projection of 79 million pounds being cut from their budget. And equally with this authority, it's almost like Armageddon. It will actually be a completely different authority if we want to go back to the austerity of the 1930s that the Tories planned for us. So hopefully this will be one of the last budgets in terms of what we've got to look at in this very drastic way, although obviously I don't deny that whatever party is in control, some economies will have to be made. But at the end of the day, people are being impoverished out there from what the bankers caused. And at the end of the day, local authorities like Harlow need to protect the poorest people. When I go to Essex, what do I find? I find condemnation of the poorest of their workers and an absolute point-blank refusal by the Tories at Essex County Council to pay the living wage. And it would only cost £160,000 to pay the living wage to Essex County Council employees, but the leader of Essex County Council refuses point-blank to do so. Tories impoverish people, they've been impoverishing people, their incomes have been reduced. And this authority, hopefully, will have a better prospect this time next year of trying to alleviate some of that hardship. Thank you.
£1.5 million further cut. The fact that we have achieved a balanced budget, the protection services and jobs, I think is a good and strong achievement. I certainly thank colleagues and officers for their contribution to that. In terms specifically of the budget consultation, the priorities were around parks, open spaces and street cleaning. We're protecting spending in those areas, and indeed there'll be some further improvement in those based on reinvesting efficiency savings from the CARE contract to build on a small improvement that's made at the back end of the growing season of last year. This includes employing additional staff and new grass cutting machinery. In terms of social behaviour, waste and recycling, again, we've protected spending in those areas. The third key area of priority was around regeneration and economic development. We're creating a specific £1 million regeneration fund to look at regeneration of the town centre in particular, supplemented by additional officer resource to drive that forward in a similar way, hopefully, that Andrew Brazier was driving forward the enterprise zone. I'm not pretending that £1 million is going to regenerate the north of the town centre. It's not about that, it's about getting the technical work done. It's about possibly buying strategic assets in there. And I expect that this fund will be supplemented from other windfall income as time goes on. And then, of course, turning the streetlights back on, responding to the very strong wishes of the people of Harlow. That's been expressed in a number of ways, whether that's petitions, whether it's budget consultation itself, whether it's the survey that's done across Essex. About more than half of people in Essex are afraid of going out after dark. And coincidentally, I was talking with a developer who did an independent study about what local people wanted in terms of improving the infrastructure of Harlow, and unprompted, done by an independent company, streetlights was the number 3 on that list. So that's responding to a very strong sphere. And in addition to that, and finally, of course, we are extending our commitment to living wage in terms of the cleaning contract that was awarded a month or so ago, and of course providing medium-term stability to the Discretionary Services Fund, as Mike has said, until 2019 for the Playhouse, Festival and Paddling Pool, in addition to providing additional funding for the museum.
My first question is on the corporate plan, page 63, paragraph 3, item 2, support the voluntary and community sector in making funding applications and developing its capacity. What I'd like to ask is, who's actually going to do this work for us?
In the community, we're already doing this to support people like Rainbow. We've helped over the past couple of years, for example, Rainbow Services bring different funding, and some other of the charity community grades. It's not extra people, just as a team is at the moment, and to carry on, obviously being able to priority, realistically, we can't fund everything as a council we'd like to, but we'll try and work in partnership where we can, try and help and aid, especially in difficult funding bits.
Page 53 on Appendix F, medium-term financial strategy. And the question I'd like to ask is, it says community wellbeing other, and we're talking about 207.
Talk about the risk to business rates and £204,000, which is also included as a change in 15-16 as part of the budget gap on table 1, page 84. Because it's included on table 1, does that mean we know there will be a deficit of that sum in 15-16?
Might change things like we're concerned. What's that warehouse? It's Comment. We're particularly concerned about the receivership of Comment at the moment. They are really playing about with us. They're actually putting in small units, temporary units. They're refusing basically to pay a business rate, and that's quite a significant amount of money. Sadly, the Pound warehouse has not quite come online yet, but I think that's due very shortly. So there are some imponderables, but hopefully this is the most pessimistic picture. Hopefully some of those obstacles will be overcome.
Identified, or was it more of a provision because something may not happen? But that's right. Yeah, okay. If I can continue, Chair. On the HRA, page 102 of the main pack, we're looking at the growth item to upgrade IT and so forth in housing, to implement a responsive repairs module. Does this mean there is a corresponding saving in the annual service charge?
Appetite and aspiration to prepare ourselves for the new work packages in 2017. With IT, that allows us to start ordering responsive repairs on the council system rather than a contracted system. At this stage, there is no intentions to reduce the annual service charge for that item.
Programme. Just a couple of comments, actually, rather than questions. Just working my way through. Page 127, paragraph 32. just to acknowledge the expenditure of £19,000 on restoring and refurbishing the war memorials as part of the First World War remembrance. That was a good example of where the council was showing community leadership, and there was cross-party support and working together for the benefit of the town. And equally on page 128, paragraph 39, to recognise the increase in disabled facilities grant to the private sector, enabling many more people to have a better quality of life in their own homes. And I'm just glad that we're able to achieve that. I've found a stray page at the start of the supplementary pack, page 1, which has general fund parameters. I'm not quite sure exactly where it belongs. I'm assuming it's part of the MTFS, but there we are, it's page 1. And in there, it's looking at the parameters and where they're changing in 15-16 onwards. And right at the bottom of that page, we're looking at investment interest rates. Will be reviewed during the budget process, but likely to reduce. Some of us attended a presentation last night from our corporate advisors with some options as to how we can move forward, particularly with regard to reducing risk and possibly earning income. And, and there is a specific mention in the main report on page 139, paragraph 6, where it says we are looking to diversify and then also to secure other investment products. So what I'm trying to get at is this report says there's nothing like to happen apart from going downwards, but elsewhere in the bundle it says we probably will be looking at something, and hopefully things will improve. Sort of clarification.
Available to other members if they want the minutiae of our investment programme. But we're very much in the middle of the road. We're safe, we're performing well. It's nearly 0.5%. I was at the police authority this afternoon to hear that they actually have a return of 1%. And the reasons does really depend upon the safeness of the investment, as you heard last night, and the risk that you take. And at the moment, the officers are inclined to actually err on the side of caution. It is public money, but what we heard last night, there seems to be some mileage in possibly short-term investments of slightly better than that. But I think interest rates will go up in the next year, and clearly we need to actually only invest for the short term. Simply because it's pointless actually making some long-term commitments when interest rates are.
He's correct. We're just going to accept the status quo. Well, it's like to reduce to circa 0.49%. Yes. So as I say, that seems to indicate we're adopting the status quo.
I explained last night that some of our investments in the past are up for renewal. So obviously we're not getting so much money on them, whereas historically we were actually getting more money in the past. So it's inevitable that there will be a fall on what we've actually been, as much as interest rates then start going up again, we could actually then start projecting an increase in
Again, on the supplementary agenda, on which is the actual medium-term financial strategy itself, on page 6, on 1.9, which says the uncommitted HRA reserve must be maintained at or above a minimum level of 2.5 million. But if we go to paragraph 47 of the main HRA report on page 104, paragraph 47 on page 104, it says that the recommended minimum HRA working balance should be increased from 2.695 to 2.727 million to reflect general increases in inflation. So is the minimum balance 2.5 million or 2.5 million plus inflation? Because certainly in previous years, it has been inflation linked. So if that's what's actually happening, why not update the MTFS? Or why have sort of two different, the MTFS sort of sets the rules, but the HRA seems to be following a different rule.
We're doing, yes.
So it's a recommendation to increase to 2.7 million. Don't quite see the problem.
As the MTFS says, or you are actually going to inflation link it and increase it year on year. Because the HRA report says it's being increased to reflect general increases in inflation. Now, the general fund has a minimum balance of 2.5 million, and that's staying at 2.5 million or above. And that will jog along as time goes by. If you're going to have some rules and some guidance, we'll have some rules and some guidance. But if not, just ignore it.
As soon as we slipped into comment and question, I'd just like to come back on a few of Councillor Danvers' comments. He may have been perplexed when he looked at the papers for the first time, because it may have been the first time he actually looked at a set of budget papers that he hadn't put together and didn't have a massive hole in the middle of their finances. I also like to pick up on the point that he seems to think that Conservatives go around impoverishing people. I will remind him that 25 million people in this country have received a cut in the basic rate of tax, saving them approximately £700 a year. And I would also remind him about over 2 million people have been lifted out of the basic rate of tax altogether. I'd also remind him that our very good local MP, Mr Halfon, has fought strenuously for the freezing of fuel duty continuously over his time in Parliament, and has resulted in that, which would equate to roughly over 20 pence reduction in the fuel per litre, which saves the average family about £728 a year. These are things that people do to try and help people, not to impoverish them. So I think he needs to be a little bit mindful of that. Also remind him, under his last government, income tax and fuel duty was raised no less than 12 times. So I wonder how that was helping the poorest in society. So I think before he goes around touting his credentials on saving the poor, he should look at what his own governments are doing in relation to arts. I have a technical question on the market, if I may, in the supplementary pack, page 40 of Appendix C. It says that there will be, under trailers, vehicles up to 6 metres, Monday, there's going to be, if I read that right, 50% increase in the fee for anyone with a trailer. I wondered what income the council is hoping to yield from that increase. Anybody receiving, on the receiving end of that increase, will that will impact upon their cost of living substantially?
Tony's just said it.
You said resources, not
Tony's
regeneration.
increases, not mine.
Your resources aren't. I just asked you a question.
Well, if you turn your microphone off, you get an answer. It's Tony's portfolio. People have actually brought forward from their own portfolio areas that they actually thought. I agree with you, it's probably an anomaly if it is, and Tony can actually have a look at it.
Supplementary question.
This particular item, what it's for, and the projected revenue yield, but it's not just an error.
Yes, but that was my primary question, that was not a supplementary question. I asked a supplementary question.
Could you repeat it for my benefit?
Yes. The supplementary question was that increase will impact upon the cost of living of anyone on the receiving end of that.
Now, the information, at the end of the day, the fact remains, two things of what you've said. First of all, the average person, the average family in this country is £1,500 worse off in terms of their income than they were in 2010. Secondly, one of the first things that Robert Halfon did was put up, he voted with his Tory colleagues to put up VAT to 20%, which had an impact, quite a drastic impact on petrol. I don't think Robert Halfon's got anything to do with the present oil prices, which have gone down quite considerably. When I left Chelmsford today, I actually saw petrol prices down to £1 a litre. Now, I'm not sure, is Robert Halfon claiming credit for that?
page 42, paragraph 4.3, the council will raise Harlow's profile throughout the local enterprise partnership area nationally and internationally to attract business investment in the town and work in partnership with the West Essex Alliance. But just on this point, can I ask the administration how many of these meetings the local economic partnership and the WA have attended, and whether or not, in the spirit of being on a cross-party basis in terms of regeneration, whether the opposition can sit and just witness meetings. I know we can't participate, whether we could just sit and observe.
I agree with the principle. Clearly, they're not meetings run by Harlow Council. We are participants. So I'm happy to have the conversations with the Left and West Alliance.
Second question on the corporate plan, page 68, point 9.3. In 2011, the council published its corporate equalities policy. Reading through the rest of the paragraphs, what has concerned me is there is no reference to actually review the corporate equalities policy, which actually is a very important document that guides this council. Will the council actually give an undertaking and amend the corporate plan to say that they will actually budget? This opposition welcomes the £1 million that has been moved from the Discretionary Services Fund, which is the Big Society Fund, into regeneration. What I would like to know about that £1 million, and I've raised this with officers, but I think it's important, is to set out what that actual £1 million will actually pay for. And if members of all parties could have sight of that, because it is something of cross-parties, now costing 15k. Will the leader of the council explain to me what value to the taxpayer that is, spending 15k on union facilities when we know that unions are well-resourced, they even pay for your Labour leaflets and your parliamentary candidates' activities. So will you explain the value to the taxpayer?
Particularly in areas of health and safety, I don't think there's any particular issue. If you want a list of the specific activities, I can get you one. But I'm happy that the unions made a valuable contribution, both their members and the organisation as a whole.
They're at 6k, now under your administration they're now almost 50k. But I'll leave that for one moment, we'll debate that more at the budget meeting on Thursday. In terms of general comments, I want to very briefly come back to what Councillor Danvers was saying. Let's be quite clear about what Conservatives are doing. They are proposing an income tax cut for 30 million people. As Russell has said, they have increased... Chair, it will be brief, Chair, but you've given licence to other members. I'd be grateful just for a few minutes.
There's a set of comments and a response to it. I'm not going to allow this cabinet meeting to be run in a general election campaign.
Okay.
If it's very brief, I will tolerate.
In terms of Harlow, Chair, in terms of Harlow, employment levels have increased. In fact, nationally, the unemployment in the United Kingdom is below 2 million, the lowest levels for 6 years. So actually a Conservative government is doing a lot. Now in terms of Harlow again, what Robert Halfon is doing in terms of freezing fuel duty is very important for this community. But let's be quite clear. At the budget meeting on Thursday, we will put forward an alternative. We will make clear to the media and to the public what a Conservative administration will do for this town.
Which went up right at the beginning of the Conservative government was in fact for their rich friends the reduction of surtax down from 50 pence to 45 pence. Their paymasters, in fact, in those terms, have actually benefited from that. And the only other thing in terms of employment, Chairperson, is people actually being forced out of the benefits for spurious reasons, being told to actually be at training, being told to be at training. You don't want to hear this, do you, Tony? You don't like hearing this, Tony. People being told to go to training courses on one stage and actually being put off of their benefits because they're on the training course. People on 0 hours contract.
To make those remarks, but let's be absolutely clear, it stops now. No, absolutely. So I've allowed you to make some comments, I've allowed you, Councillor Perry, to make some comments, but seriously, it stops now. I'm going to focus on it, and I'm not going to tolerate an extension of a general election campaign in this chamber during a cabinet meeting. Are there any further comments specifically about these items?
party consensus either. I'd just like to thank councillors on all sides, tenants and leaseholders who've been involved, and officers, of course, who've put together the housing reports here. There is ambition within these reports for people within the town in terms of 1/3 of the housing in the town is still council housing, and to make sure that that is setting an example to the 2/3 that are not in terms of more and better housing and meeting decency and making sure that we are maintaining that decency, but also lots of achievements in terms of building council houses, trying to meet the supply issues. And I've said it time and time again, and I'm not going to make a party political point on this. Government of whatever colour in the 2015 election, they need to go big on housing to make sure that we alleviate the problems that there are out there. And the next government needs to really sort the housing crisis out. But in terms of what we're doing here in Harlow, we're trying our best to try and make sure that the current stock is as good quality as possible, but also to make sure that it meets the needs of our residents. But I'd like to thank all those involved in this process. It's not always a smooth ride, but I would like to thank everybody that has been involved.
The first is you've made great play. There's awful feedback on the microphone. You've made great play of the streetlights issue. You and I think have very similar views on streetlights. And you've said that you will put the money to Essex County Council to fund the streetlight switch on. Have you had discussions with Councillor Rodney Bass as to whether this will be acceptable to him, or have you done this without speaking to him?
The last of those two conversations was this morning, and confirmed that while they have a formal decision to make on Monday, he is minded that he doesn't see why Essex wouldn't comply with this. And Councillor John Spence, who's the portfolio holder for resources, has said on regional television and regional radio that he believes that we should be allowed to do this. So clearly we have some detail to resolve, and we still get the formal decision by the County Council in principle on Monday, and then we have the detail to resolve.
Since you, rightly so, the officers have done a great deal of help with you in this budget. Since you managed to get to 1% increase, sorry, 1.5% increase, why have you not taken advantage of the government's offer to freeze council tax this year?
The grant to freeze that only applies to 1 year. It would have a £400,000 cumulative impact over the term of the mid-term financial strategy. So what we're about here is making sustainable decisions around the finances. So we're going to make a decision to turn the street lights on. We need to make sure that is funded on an ongoing basis. If we took the freeze grant, that would only fund partly, because it's not 1.5%, it's 1% of the first year. 81, 93, 96 and 120 relating to items 11 to 16 on the agenda. Are we agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Item 17, the Treasury Management Strategy on pages 137 to 140, and obviously the supplementary report that goes with that. Do we have a proposer?
So moved, Chair.
I will second that.
Briefing last night, once the papers, either we can get them out to those individuals, or otherwise we can do a general summary to members if that's what they want.
Just essentially the Treasury Management Strategy retains its three priorities as security as number one, liquidity number two, and yield thirdly. So the changes that we're proposing to make are essentially to address the increased risk from local authorities' exposure to bank stress or failure as a result of government legislation changes. And as a consequence of that, looking to diversify the portfolio of investments. So it's principally about increasing the security of our investments while maintaining liquidity. One of the side benefits of that is we might get a small improvement in yield as well, because bank base rates are low. So any comments or So, we agreed with recommendations on page 137. Agreed. Item 18, again, the procurement strategy on pages 141 to 156.
I'd like to move it, Chair.
I'll probably second that, Chair.
Just briefly, Chair. Strategy.
It arises partly because of the changes in the European and national legislation, but also it's to strengthen and improve our existing strategy. And I hope that it will make a small but significant difference in the working conditions of Harlow residents. We hope to influence suppliers, and they will introduce measures in this way which will increase fairness and equality. That's our main aim, Chair.
Welcome the strategy, and I welcome the depths to which it will go to encourage local businesses to apply for contracts with the local authority. I think that's a really good step. I have one other comment, and that's on page 149, stage 3, market engagement. That first sentence doesn't read very well. I think there are 2 words missing. I think it should say the Council is committed to promoting a strong local economy by providing high quality information and advice to assist local businesses, and the Council engages with the market in a variety of...
There's a cross-party support on welcoming this, and particularly the ways of trying to extend contracts to local businesses. But I do have a question on page 151 where we're talking about blacklisting and other discriminatory practices. Second paragraph, if it comes to light that a breach has occurred, I'm just wondering what degree of evidence you would actually take as a breach, as to how strong that evidence would be in the case of challenge by a potential supplier.
12 months ago, I specifically talked about evidence there, not assumption and what have you, and the same definition that the Commissioner's Office used when it prosecuted number of organisations in this regard. So I would expect it to be relevant, robust, i.e. the definition of evidence.
But I point to page 151 where we talk about 0-hour contracts, where it says the Council will refuse to the extent the law allows the appointment of contractors who make use of 0-hour contracts. Firstly, is that likely to mean that prices in our procurement are going to go up because of this decision? And secondly, whilst I'm no fan of 0-hour contracts, they are legal. Your own party leader hasn't said that he will abolish them. And indeed, a report in the Mirror last year said 62 Labour MPs were employing staff on 0-hour contracts. What's so wrong that Harlow Council can't deal business with someone who uses 0-hour contracts if it's okay for the Labour?
Share with you the Daily Mirror web link if you want.
Never mind the Daily Mirror, I think
I've often said the
policy of the Labour Party generally, I think, is actually to refuse 0 hours contract. Now, it may ultimately mean an increase in costs, but that is well worth it in the light of the outcome, because we don't use 0-hour contracts, and I'm proud that we don't. It's very important, so why should we encourage our future partners to sort of return to the 30s and the insecurity of queuing up and waiting for the tap on the shoulder when we can provide some measure of security for future workforce?
And that's factored into our budget. Yes. So yes, there are sometimes financial consequences of making decisions on values and priorities and principles. No further comments or questions? Right, not on. So the recommendation on page 141 to adopt comments actually, are we agreed? Agreed. Item 19 on page 157 to 160 on the disposal.
Page 157, items A and B, with a slight amendment in B where it says delegates authority to the Chief Operating Officer instead of the Head of Regeneration. This is an important part of increasing supply for housing, but what's really crucial about this is it's a derelict building where we're going to have 100% nomination rights for the housing register and 100% affordable housing. So this is a good news story for the town and something that we should celebrate, that we're able, even if it is in a small way, as I said earlier, increase the supply of housing for people out there.
Ward, Summers and Kingsmore. Just say we're really pleased that this has actually finally happened. It's been going on for a long time. I know many residents have been concerned about antisocial behaviour around the derelict building. So from this side, we welcome disposal of this, and it's being put back into practical and good use. So a good news story.
For the area. I'm delighted that this is finally going through. It really is an eyesore, and there's been a lot of antisocial behaviour around there, so well done. Thank you very much at last.
And item B, outlined by Councillor Truan on page 157. Agreed. Item 20 on the agenda, debt write-offs on pages 161 to 165.
So moved, Chair.
I will second. Are there any questions or comments? No. Are we agreed with the recommendations A, B and C on page 161?
Agreed.
Agreed. There are no communications from committee working groups, part of the panels, and the minutes of the Housing Standards Board and the Cabinet Overview Working Group are noted. So noted. There are no matters of urgent business, so I conclude this meeting at 8:35. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.